Speaking of big games yesterday in Philadelphia, the 49ers all over Kyle Draper's Eagles, 42-19. That's why Kyle is wearing the Brock Purdy jersey today. He said, 49ers win, I'll wear a Brock Purdy jersey. Joining us with more on the game and what the game means to the MVP race in the NFL, senior writer at NFL.com, NFL Network's Jeffrey Chadiha with us. How are you today, Jeffrey?
I'm doing well. How you guys doing?
We're doing fine, and we appreciate your time very much. You know, it's an emotional day both ways here on the show. Kyle being from Philadelphia, we've had a few callers poking fun at him today, but how did the 49ers win impact the MVP race as you see it, Jeff?
Well, it certainly boosted Brock Purdy into the conversation. He probably should have been there a long time ago, and kind of made Jalen Hurts go down a step. But you watched that game yesterday and you realize the best team in the NFL is in San Francisco, and usually you get the best team in the NFL and the quarterback's playing at a high level, that puts Brock Purdy front and center. And I realize he's got a great team, and I fully acknowledge I was late to the party on this last season, but I think a lot of people look at him like he's still Mr. Irrelevant, 7th round pick, lucky to be playing in the league and leading a team that is really loaded. And he's still got a loaded team, but he's very much a playmaker. You can look at his numbers against good teams like the Eagles, like the Jaguars, like the Cowboys. 10 touchdowns, no picks in those games. That gets my vote.
Jeff Chadiha, thanks so much for joining us. You know, when you look at the numbers, you know, Brock Purdy, everything screams out MVP candidate. When I look at yesterday's game, you know, being an Eagles guy that I am, an Eagles fan, I look at that secondary. Is that going to be the issue that comes back to bite them when it matters the most, or is there anything they can do here in this last month of the season to improve that secondary?
Well, they've been concerned about that all season long, and you're right, they've been able to overcome that because Hurts is such a good player. They're such a clutch team. They're well coached, and they find ways to win. But you look at last week against Buffalo, gave up over 500 yards of offense. Josh Allen had 40 yards of that on his own. They gave up 42 to San Francisco. They know the secondary has been a big issue, and they talked about. I know people over there who I saw earlier this year. They talked about losing Avonte Maddox to injury. They talked about C.J. Gardner-Johnson going to Detroit free agency. Just those losses were huge for that team, and they play such a very simple way of defense. They don't try to disguise a lot of stuff, and they try to just beat you with talent. But when they're not winning up front, and it's hard to do against the 49ers when you play that way, it's hard for them to cover up some of those issues on the back end. So, yeah, it's definitely a big issue for them moving forward.
Jeffrey Chadiha with us from NFL.com and NFL Network. You wrote something really interesting today, Jeffrey. I'm wondering if you could explain to us here, why do you think this year's MVP choice comes down to big moments more than statistics?
Well, because you look at one, you're not getting a number of big games. This definitely has become more of a defense-first league this season for whatever reason. Part of that is, you know, Tom Brady's gone, Ben Roethlisberger's gone, Drew Brees' gone. You don't have the veteran quarterbacks. Aaron Rodgers has been hurt. Kirk Cousins has been hurt. Those guys have names and not playing. So you got a lot of mediocre quarterback play, and you also have a lot of teams that are in contention. And so when you have that, it's almost the Heisman Trophy, where you have these big schools playing at each other, Michigan versus Ohio State or Georgia versus Alabama, where you have a chance to watch these guys go head-to-head and see who really stands out. And so Brock Purdy's had those opportunities now against the Cowboys, you know, against the Eagles. Dak Prescott's going to get those opportunities, you know, against Buffalo, against Philadelphia, against San Francisco, and on down the line. So you have all these players who are also trying to prove themselves as stars now. You know, it's just, you look at that list, there's a lot of players there who people have doubted or we don't know that much about, but they're all starting to take star turns because the opportunity is there for them.
Jeff Chadiha joining us here on the Drive Guys, Sactown Sports 1140. Jeff, we were talking MVP, and, you know, I could argue, you know, first 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks of the season, the MVP of the Niners was Christian McCaffrey. Where does he fit into this conversation?
Well, unfortunately, he's in that boat with the Tyreek Hills and the Myles Garretts of the world, where you don't have so many guys getting that kind of love. And he's definitely had his moments and had his big games. But when you're not a quarterback, you really have to have a number of splash plays. You got to be doing it every week. And so if you don't do it as a running back every week, he's had a good season, over 1,000 yards. He's an all-pro, Pro Bowl type player. But if you're not doing it every week, people tend to forget about you. And that's really – he's going to be in the conversation for Offensive Player of the Year, but I figure Tyreek Hill's probably going to run away with that the way things are going for him. But he certainly had a great year. And you look at what's around him as well, he also suffers from that in the same way Brock Purdy does. Because when you got George Kittle, you got Ayuk, you got Debo, all those guys. People see the highlights, and every week they see a different player doing something great. It draws attention away from a guy like McCaffrey.
Jeff, I wanted to circle back to something you touched on in one of your first responses here. Are there just, when it comes to Brock Purdy and his candidacy, are there just too many people who refuse to see him as an MVP type player for him to actually have a legitimate shot at winning this award?
I think that's going to be what people hold against him. And now he's got a great opportunity to shake that, because now people fully see them as the best team in the league based on what happened last week. But there's also recency bias here. And so the more we get away from that game, the more he's going to have the 300-yard, 4-touchdown game to keep it going. But yeah, I do believe that there is, and I people throughout the league who I've talked to, from personnel people to fans to whoever, other radio shows, there's always, well, he's the guy who's basically playing point guard over there. He's the guy who's passing the ball to Kittle and Debo and Ayuk and handing off to McCaffrey. How could you not put up big numbers? And the argument I have to that is, well, tell me a quarterback who's playing well who wins at a board who doesn't have great players around him. I live in Kansas City, and Patrick Mahomes had Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. I look at what Jalen Hurts has in Philadelphia. They loaded that offense for him with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and DeAndre Swift. So it's like, if you're going to play well at that level and be in that conversation, you probably got a lot of talent around you anyway.
Jeff Chadiha joining us. Jeff, when you look at, what the Niners have been able to do, it's sort of, their season has been broken up into the thirds. They had this hot start, 5-0, and then they lose 3 in a row. Now they've won 4 in a row. What do you think has changed, I guess, since that 3-game losing streak? What's been the biggest part of improvement for this team?
Health. They got Trent Williams got healthy. Debo got healthy. McCaffrey had that oblique, I think it was, injury. He's gotten healthier. You can talk about Steve Wilkes and the defense and some of the moves they made over there, trading for a couple of those defensive ends, and Steve Wilkes going to the sideline from the box. But ultimately, it's just a really talented team. And no matter how good you are in this league, you're going to go through rough patches. But the really good teams, the ones that are well coached, are going to find a way to push through that and find their way. You're seeing Detroit go through some of that now. The Chiefs have been going through it. I live here in Kansas City for the bulk of this season. You've seen it in Buffalo. You've seen it in Miami. None of these teams are, we want to act like this is like the 1970s Steelers or the 1980s 49ers, where these teams are loaded from top to bottom. At the end of the day, they're all going to have their moments where they get exposed. But, if you had one more thing I would say about that, I think that 3-game losing streak probably gave them a lot more focus, made them realize that we're not just going to get back to the championship game because we want to. We're going to have to go back and earn it. So I see that as well in the way they play with their hunger. Yeah,
Jeffrey Chadiha, nice enough to join us here with the Drive guys. You mentioned the Chiefs, and I understand your point. There's just so much more parity in the NFL this year than there even has been in recent years, and there's been more parity in recent years than there used to be. But my question is, I was stunned by what happened to the Chiefs last night. Should I have been? No, not if you see them all season long. Yeah, I say the fan base here is really thoroughly frustrated by what they've been seeing, especially offensively, because they've grown accustomed to the quarterback going for almost 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns, the offense scoring 30, 40 points a game, and they've come back to earth this year. And the receivers are a big part of the story. They're not on the same page with the quarterback. Most games they're not catching the ball consistently. But, the offensive line has been an issue. This entire year, their offensive tackles haven't played great. They've had turnover problems and penalties in other areas. And this is what happens sometimes when you have a team that is you win a championship with a lot of young guys, as they did last year, and then you come back. Some of these young guys, they don't understand that, okay, now it's even harder to do it. And I feel like a lot of teams are really taking it to them and really coming after them, and they're really on their heels a lot. They're playing really good defensively, but
sometimes when they play, it seems like they just expect to win because of the Chiefs. And I liken it to Mike Tyson back in the day before he got into the ring with Buster Douglas. And when he walked the ring before that, people were scared before the fight even started, probably had lost before the fight started. Now they know they can knock them out. It's a different fight now.
Hey, Jeff, final question for me. When you look at the NFC, you got the Niners, you got the Eagles. How serious should we take the Cowboys and the Lions as threats to make it to the Super Bowl?
I think they're both legitimate threats. And I know Detroit is not looked great the last couple of weeks, but they're well coached. They're very physical. The way they're built on the offensive defensive line, it's very similar to the way the Niners are built. Like they're going to be able to get after you, and that kind of style is going to help you win games in the playoffs. And Dallas, too, has always been talented. It's just a matter of, is Dak Prescott going to make the plays? And are they going to be able to avoid the mistakes in the big games they've had against San Francisco? And so, I always say nobody lives in a vacuum forever. Like you either grow or you get worse. And so I think when teams look at those kind of teams who have young talent, who are well coached, who've been hungry, yeah, they're dangerous because they want to win as bad as anybody else.
Hey, if you're a 49er fan, don't miss what Jeffrey Chadiha had to say today at NFL.com about Brock Purdy and what yesterday meant for his MVP candidacy. Jeffrey Chadiha, we appreciate your time very much. Thanks, Jeff. Enjoy the rest of the week. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
All right, now.
Yeah, we're going to take a quick timeout. By the way, did you see I don't know how much you saw the game last night. Just another one of those blatant pass interferences at the end of the game that the officials decided,